This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway To Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. Episode 121 from the Subway To Shea studios in my office, and we are live. Make sure to do 2 things tonight. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel while you are watching this. If you are in the chat, welcome. I will definitely get to your comments and questions tonight, along with my guests. This episode will be posted tomorrow on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so don't worry if you miss anything. I got you covered. You'll be able to listen to it there. You can go back and watch it on YouTube as well. And before we bring our guest on this week's show, I got to thank last week's guests, Keith and Key of the Shea and Sons podcast. Make sure you're following them and subscribing to their YouTube page and following them on Twitter with their great insight as well. We had a blast not only bringing this episode to you, but doing it live last week. It was a lot of fun. It was the first live one, and I'm so happy to be doing it again. I received a lot of great responses following the episode, and the Shea Bros will be back on again soon. Make sure to subscribe, like I said, to their YouTube channel and subscribe to their podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Now, with Shohei Ohtani officially off the board with that record-breaking and, may I say, ridiculous 10 years, $700 million contract, which we got a little bit more ridiculous news into that. All eyes are on Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and here to help me out with the Yamamoto Watch, breaking it all down, is the host of the Simply Amazin podcast alongside Tarun Sharma and the creator and writer for the Apple on Substack. It's Tim Ryder. Tim, welcome back to the Subway To Shea podcast, my friend.
What's up, Ant? Thanks for having me, buddy.
I'm doing well. It was so great to see you out there. It was the first time we met actually in person at the Queens Baseball Convention, doing that panel with Mark Healy for the State of the Mets. That was a lot of fun. You know, you were the 3rd guest in the history of the Subway To Shea podcast way back when we started. I can't believe we haven't done this more often, but I'm happy to have you on now, and we are going to get that dialogue moving. It's been a long time, man. Too long.
Absolutely. And yeah, man, look at the heights that you've reached since episode number 3. No, really, man, it's impressive. I love to see it. Just people with like honest, good content moving ahead in the world. I love to see it, man. And all the congratulations to everything you've done, all the work you put into it. It's impressive.
I appreciate you so much. Definitely one of the content creators I look up to, especially since coming into being one. You with your Simply Amazin podcast, with writing for the Apple for Substack. I really appreciate you coming on and, helping me along the way as well. Let's get right into this. Before we get into Yamamoto, I want to quickly address the whole Shohei Ohtani saga with you. And, he got that 10-year, $700 million contract. But now we're seeing all these deferred payments, and these Dodgers have really set themselves up to quite possibly being the leaders. Let's be fair. The Mets were said to be one of the leaders because Cohen and his money. The Yankees were said to be a leader because of, the aura and the mystique around the Yankee organization. But now you look at the LA Dodgers with all those deferred payments, and I think Ohtani's going to be making only $2 million a year, and they will try to bring in, I don't know if that's correct. I may have said that wrong, but I feel like it is $2 million a year from everything that I've read, with everything being deferred on the back end. The Dodgers quite possibly could be the leaders now in the clubhouse for Yamamoto.
Well, what we've heard about Yamamoto so far is that, he's certainly weighing his options. We've heard reports that he wants to play with another Japanese player, and what better Japanese player would there be to play with than Ohtani? As far as Ohtani's deferred money and what that means for the Dodgers. All right. So On the books, he'll be making $2 million a year. He's deferring $680 million of his $700 million contract. Against the competitive balance tax or the luxury tax, I think the Dodgers are going to show a $46 million salary for him on a yearly basis. Don't ask me how that works. I'm not things. Just reading reports. I know on Simply Amazin this morning, I pointed to John Becker. I pointed to Chris Soto. Of course, the big journalists out there, but the independent guys, they really had a finger on this pulse early. They knew that if money was going to be deferred, and big money, as we kind of knew from the start, it would affect, the Dodgers luxury tax payroll. And now that they've got that down to almost unprecedented levels, they can absolutely add another superstar, possibly two. So yeah, if Yamamoto, I think it's just all going to come down to him. If he wants to go to the Dodgers, they certainly have the financial flexibility, with or without Ohtani, to do that. They're one of the more, cash-laden franchises in pro sports. The Mets, I'm almost surprised that they haven't been making more waves. And I keep on saying, Stearns has a plan. Stearns has a plan. And I don't want to put all their eggs into Yamamoto's basket, as beneficial as him coming on board would be. But in the same breath, you don't want to miss the boat. And you don't want to fall out of favor with the fan base. And you don't want to kind of throw away all that goodwill that you built up over the last couple of years, the whole Uncle Steve narrative and, the Mets are doing it right. And I'm not saying that they're not, but, narratives go a long way. And if you have some of the fan base and some of the louder voices in the fan base and some of the talking heads out there, poo-pooing, the Mets didn't get Ohtani. The Mets, maybe they didn't get Yamamoto. They didn't push for Soto. I'm not sold on the idea that they don't have a plan, but the more things are unfolding, I think Yamamoto should be a very important part of at least their immediate future in the hot stove.
Grant's put the number up here on the chat, so I'm going to throw that up here. $2 million from 2023 to 2033, $68 million from 2034 to 2043. Thank you for putting those up, Grant. Appreciate that. And if you want to chime in on the chat, you got questions, anything, put it up there. We'll do our best to get to them tonight. A lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is going to come from some of the articles that were written by Will Salmon of The Athletic. And, he talked about the whole situation and what Cohen had said in that article, never really having Ohtani's agent reach out to him personally, and he thought that was telling. What did you make of Cohen's comments from that article and, just Ohtani's really lack of interest to want to come to New York?
Well, I don't necessarily think that reflects poorly on the Mets. I think Ohtani had I don't want to say his mind made up, because nobody knows what his decisions were going into this or where his head was going into this. But, you almost get the feeling that the Mets could have thrown the same contract at him and he still would have went to LA. And that's fine. That's the player's prerogative. Ohtani's camp not reaching out to the Mets or not really putting the Mets at the forefront, that's one way to look at it. And I can appreciate Steve Cohen's point of view on that. It's like, well, I think that says a lot. And I'm sure it does to an extent. I think if the Mets wanted to make their presence known, they could have also done that. But, maybe a guy like Ohtani and that type of financial commitment wasn't in the Mets' plans, wasn't in what they had in mind for what this organization is going to be built into. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, considering he is the unicorn and he's the greatest ball player we're probably ever going to see. But I guess in the same breath, you have to kind of almost trust their process, or at least hope that you trust their process. But yeah, you have to wonder how Mets brass internally is feeling right now, or might be feeling if Yamamoto falls off the board.
Yeah, it's going to be a very tough thing that they're going to have to go through, not only with, the media in New York, but the fan base as well. I mean, especially after seeing Soto get traded to the Yankees, the goodwill that Cohen has or had, and the same thing going on with David Stearns, who's only been here for a month, that kind of dissipates a lot. And I'm one of the more patient fans. I know you are too. You're a very optimistic fan. I've seen it on Twitter. There are a lot of Met fans who are not like that, and they're frustrated, and they're rightfully so. They have every right to feel the way that they want to feel and have the opinions that they want to have. So with that said, striking out on Yamamoto is definitely going to set them back. And, we look at it, like I said at the start, with Ohtani off the board, we are officially on Yamamoto watch. Today it was, I think, the Yankees and the Giants who had spoke to him. I think he's out there in LA right now. He was always going to be the more realistic option for the Mets. They need starting pitching. He's at the top of their list. He is the guy. That's who the Mets want. There's no doubt about it. There has been all the talk over the media and baseball about the Mets wanting Yamamoto. He's the number one free agent they covet. And Tim, last week, Will Salmon also wrote an article during the winter meetings about Cohen and David Stearns flying to Japan to visit Yamamoto, and I thought that was a pretty big deal. A lot of contention on X following that news that, Cohen was desperate and was making a last-minute plea to try to convince Yamamoto to sign with the Mets. I tend to think that he was doing his due diligence, and if you want someone that bad, you will do whatever it takes to sign them. So that means going out there at whatever hours of the morning, trying to get to Yamamoto and get a meeting with him, take him out to lunch, dinner, whatever it is, the whole courting process of bringing Yamamoto to Queens, you got to do it, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a 14-hour flight that has to be taken. I think even before Ohtani signed, I think everyone knew that there were going to be a lot of deep-pocketed suitors for Yamamoto. And the Mets making the effort and going out to him before he's doing his U.S. tour. I'm pretty sure they made their adoration known and probably, let the player know, hey, whatever offers you might get, please circle back to us. That's how much we want you on board. As a fan, I hope the Mets did that. And, if they're going to prioritize Yamamoto this offseason and fill out depth and then kind of move up the chart. But hey, if this is how the dominoes are falling, where Yamamoto is next, you got to put all that on hold. And if this is their guy, you gotta go all out for him. If that, like you said, if that takes going to Japan to do it, go for it. If that takes circling back around and outbidding the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Giants, whoever else might be in the mix, if you feel like it's going to be a win for the club, even with that type of investment, where you might be looking at $30 million a year, but this is a 26-year-old pitcher who has stuff that should play really, really well in the major leagues. Steve Cohen knows all about risk management and risk mitigation. If you got, the pockets that he does, this is the type of risk that you kind of live for, right?
No, yeah, absolutely. And, the whole talk at the end of the last season and as we got into the off season was, how much is he going to make? A little kind of started off as maybe 200 mil to 250. Now, last week we were talking about reaching up to $300 million. And now this was pre-Ohtani contract. So now that the whole Ohtani contract has been situated, could he get more than the 300 mil that's talking about? And that's just a contract. We're not even talking about the posting fee that has to be put in that as well.
I think probably first episode back after our little hiatus at Simply Amazin. I was looking at like 8 years, 24 million. I think that 30 million a year is probably going to stand up. If there's going to be competition for his services, we might see that increase. We might see the years go to 10, 300. Who knows? For a 25, 26-year-old pitcher, someone might go above and beyond. I mean, it's it's all going to come down to his market. And if you have some of these reported players in the market for Yamamoto, this could get really crazy. And this is, I guess one of the times as Mets fans, we should be glad that Steve Cohen has all the capital and financial backing that he does. But it almost makes me nervous. Like, oh man, okay, let's say we get him, and let's say they put all this investment into him. One, it's not our money, so we can't really get that worked up. But what if he's not that guy? And I'm not saying he won't be. I really think he will be. But these are the questions that the organization is undoubtedly asking themselves. It's got to be tough.
Yeah, it definitely does have to be tough, especially when you're giving up so much money to starting pitching, which there are injuries that happen and things can change. So we were talking about the years and talking about all this money, and it could set back a team, especially a team that maybe doesn't have the financial might that Cohen has, or now that the Dodgers have, and what the Yankees have. Getting a player like this and outbidding other teams for one player, and that player gets hurt, that sometimes is crippling to the franchise, and sets them back even longer. But outside of what we saw with Ohtani, there really wasn't no bidding process. It always seemed like, even midway through last season, when he was gonna reach free agency, that the Dodgers were the team. It always felt like that. It felt like there was going to be no competition. Even with the Mets, it didn't really feel like that. We all thought that he wanted to stay out in the West and be on the West Coast, whether it was the Dodgers, Giants, Padres before the whole thing with their deal or now that they are in debt. So it felt like the Padres could have been a team that was also in it. But with Yamamoto, there seems to be a whole lot of suitors. We talked about the Yankees. We talked about the Dodgers. The Red Sox seem to be in it. Obviously, the Giants. So many teams seem to be in. Now the Blue Jays as well, who were unable to get Ohtani's services. So, are there any other teams that maybe we're not talking about that you think may be in on Yamamoto outside of the ones we've talked about just now?
Well, you're always going to have teams that are willing to compare, teams who you would dub as competitors or contenders. If they have the pockets to do so, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked if, let's say, maybe, I'm not saying the Astros might have a chance, but the Astros, they always have a little bit of money to kick around if they need it. Let's say they get the itch to get on the Yamamoto tour. Let's say the Rangers get in there. There are always going to be suitors looking for good starting pitching, just to echo what you just said. For a guy who's 26, who's 4 years younger than most free agents hitting their open market phase of their career, with the stuff that he has, he's got a fastball that could touch high 90s. He's got a splitter that tunnels perfectly off of that fastball. And he's got a curveball, which you generally don't see a lot of in Japan, that looks like it's been around, it looks like it's been playing in the majors for years. That's how well he places it. That's how well he disguises it. That's how well he angular-wise and tunnel-wise, he matches it up with his fastball, and it just falls off the table. He pitches almost like he's a veteran, but he's 26 years old. And I'm not even that concerned about his small stature. We've seen guys with small stature do well. I'm not worried about that. If he has the stuff to compete, he will. And, you could look at the Cardinals. You could look at the Braves. You could look at the Cubs. Anyone with a little bit of money to spend who thinks that they can make a real push in the time that they're going to have Yamamoto, you have to almost assume that the conversation's been had internally. And if they want to be added to the Yamamoto tour list, most likely all they have to do is say the word. But I guess, you got to have the bag of Rawlings to do it.
We hear all these rumors and comments made about what, Yamamoto's looking for or what he wants out of this process. whether it's money, the legacy we hear about with some teams wearing the number 18, like the Yankee fans seem to think as well. In your heart of hearts, will Yamamoto be in Queens and sign with the Mets?
Yes. And you know why? I think that the trip to Japan set the Mets apart. I think the ability to outbid anyone that they want to sets them apart. I think the presence of Kodai Senga may set them, I don't know about apart, but at least put them in a different category than maybe other teams. I think the allure of pitching in New York could be a thing for him. I don't think he's got that, Yankees itch that we saw like Masahiro Tanaka have when he came over, which is such a big deal when he came over, but he was only focused on the Yankees. I don't think that's going to be the case with Yamamoto. To say what you're saying about the number 18, I don't see a jersey number coming into play and stopping anybody from stopping him from going anywhere. I do think the Mets, have I don't want to say an inside track, but a very good chance of bringing him in. They want him here. I think it's ultimately going to be up to the player. And yeah, just from what we've seen and the type of trajectory he's been on as a ball player, he always wants more. He always wants to achieve more. What's better than winning it all in New York? Yeah. You know what? Write it down on the wall. Yamamoto to New York for a bunch of money.
I don't want to be a homer. I also think that Yamamoto is going to sign with the Mets, but I'll even go one step further. I don't think that the Yankees will be in top 2. I think it's going to be between the Mets and the Dodgers. Both pitchers need a legitimate ace. The Yankees already have that in Garrett Cole, which would move Yamamoto to second. Like you mentioned with Kodai Senga, I think that's huge. I think the fact that what Jeremy Hefner, and I give him a lot of slack for a lot of things over the years, but what Jeremy Hefner and that, I don't even know if they had the pitching lab then. I think it was just in the process of being created. But what the Mets were able to do with Kodai Senga in getting him, primed by midseason to take the ball every 5th day and stay healthy and stay on top of his game. I mean, it felt like he got better and better after every start. That's got to be a selling point and something that the Mets had to have addressed with Yamamoto. If we bring you in here, we already have evidence that, with Kodai Senga, who's a lot older than Yamamoto is, that our process will work and will make you a better pitcher by the end of the season. And on top of that, you're going to be the guy here. If he was to win a World Series with the Yankees, and to a certain extent, even with the Dodgers, I don't think he's going to be the guy, right? They got Ohtani now, the Yankees got Soto, and the Yankees have the history that they have. But with the Mets, it's different. Obviously we don't have that allure and that history that every other team has or that the Dodgers and the Yankees have. But I think that's a big part, because not having that and having a guy like Yamamoto come in and win a championship, he will be held at one of the highest regards, because we all know the Mets are a pitching first team, and we've seen what they've done with the DeGrom and Dwight Gooden and Seaver. If he could deliver a title here, I mean, his character and his aura in Queens would go up tenfold.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we've seen what World Series winners in Queens have done for players in New York. Look at the 69 Mets, look at the 86 Mets. These are, as close to as sports legends as you can get in this town. It doesn't happen very often. Like you said, the Yankees have this storied history and all these, 20 whatever championships. When you win with the Mets, it's almost a different legacy. It's like, wow, these guys are, you got to remember the 69 Mets were doing ticker tape parades. I think they were sandwiched between astronauts getting ticker tape parades, like literally a couple of weeks apart. Like, there's a certain, like you said, allure to winning in New York. Winning in Queens is and again, most of us wouldn't even know. I don't remember 86. I was 3 years old, but it almost feels like it would be different. And it almost feels like Yamamoto being involved in something like that would make it and of course Senga too, it would make it a global thing. And one of these days, whenever Ohtani wins a World Series, you'll have that same kind of effect. But you can imagine it here, combining that global phenomena with a New York phenomena, with the quote-unquote little brother phenomena of the Mets. Man, that would be like the perfect storm of champagne and tears. And, it would be amazing. And, I think that with the right selling point, you could get Yamamoto to buy into that. But, yeah, ultimately it's going to be up to the player. And if the Mets are going to throw all the money that they have, or all the expendable money that they have at somebody, I think it's got to be him, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we know how big of the Asian market that we have. We saw it when Ohtani came over. We see it with Senga, and how the fan base has really brought him in as one of their own. It's like Senga, I feel like has to be one of the more popular, Mets out there. You got the ghost fork. You always get the Sega sound when he comes out to pitch and strikes out a batter. So I really do think that the Mets, at the very least, will finish top 2 in trying to get Yamamoto. I think the Dodgers are right up there, and I don't think that the Yankees, for all that it's worth, for all that we've, the history and all that stuff, I do think that they fall behind both the Mets and the Dodgers. Before we move on to other news as well, let's hit up some of these comments in here. Matt Ibanez from the Till Mets Do Us Park podcast. Check out this crew. What up, boys? What's up, Ibby? How you doing? Carlos Ramos, he agrees with you on the whole Yamamoto situation and everything you said on bringing Yamamoto in here. MEZBX says, who else has Hefner made better? And that's why I mentioned before, I've always been critical of Jeremy Hefner. But in this current situation, in trying to bring in Yamamoto and the work that he's done with Senga, he's got to get credit for that. He has to get credit for how they were able to bring Senga up to speed in what is a very different game from what they play over in Japan. The ball's different. The mound is different. Everything is different over there. To have him come up to speed and pitch the way that he pitched, especially down the stretch, and to finish, what was it, third in a Rookie of the Year, or second in Rookie of the Year, third or fourth in Cy Young voting. That's he's got to get at least a little bit of credit for doing that. For sure.
I would, I'm going to lean on Senga more so than Hefner as far as Senga's progression. I think him getting comfortable, him getting used to the ball, him getting used to hitters and how they approach him, and then kind of feeding off that. I think with his guidance, with Hefner's guidance, especially coming from an ex-pitcher, an ex-MLB pitcher in Hefner, I think that adds another layer to what he gives to guys. And just being able to kind of pass over that information, be a conduit from the analytics department to the players and give it to them in a digestible way. I think that was his selling point to come here to begin with. And now that they're giving him all these resources and this staff and this pitch lab and all this extra data, I think he's, I personally think Hefner has the ability to be one of those transcendent pitching coaches. And if he just needs some time, and I think the question was, who else has Hefner made better? I look directly at some guys, who haven't really taken the full step to what they're going to be. But look at what Tyler McGill came here with minimal AAA experience. And Hefner eased him into being a major leaguer. And he's actually a back-end starter. He can be pegged as a back-end starter, and I think most fans would be okay with that. Whether he's going to be successful over the course of the year, we'll see. With Hefner's tutelage, I think he has a better chance. David Peterson was wet behind the ears. David Peterson has come along, shown progress. He's been thrown into the fire in different positions, threw him into the bullpen, and he responded well. I think Hefner's presence helps that along. Look at Taijuan Walker. He parlayed season with the Mets, a good season with the Mets, into his time with the Phillies. And, he's been all right. But Taijuan Walker under Jeremy Hefner's tutelage was a little bit more effective. He changed it up often, kept hitters on their heels, and it seemed to work out for him. And he's not saying he's not the same guy now, but he almost had a little bit more juice to him under Hefner's eye.
With all the struggles that McGill and Peterson have gone through, we have to remember, like you said, they came up during a time where the Mets were going through a lot of injuries. I think they were in Double-A at the time. Yeah. So, they didn't really get to go through that minor league process that a lot of pitchers get to go through. They were thrown right into the fire. And, I tend to look at what happened over the last month and a half of the season. You saw progress from Tyler McGill. You saw progress from David Peterson. You saw progress from Jose Butto, who made some really good starts down the stretch. And Luke Casey, too. Luke Casey, another one. I think he went 4-0 coming down the stretch, and he pitched very well. So he does get a little bit of credit for helping these guys out. And obviously, the Verlanders and the Scherzers of the world, they have their own pitching methods and ways of doing things. So I know he had no effect on those guys and the veterans, but even helping Quintana come back, from the injury he did, missing half a season, Quintana was really steady the whole way through on his return. So that was nice to see as well. Let's go more into these comments. That's My Sports. Says, I have no problem getting Imanaga if we can't get Yamamoto. And we didn't get into this. What would be the plan B if the Mets don't get Yamamoto? Imanaga is one of those guys. And what are your thoughts on one Imanaga and how you would handle the plan B if, let's say, the Mets don't get Yamamoto?
Well, Imanaga, this is a guy who's like a strikeout master. A little bit older, probably around the same age as Senga. You don't see in the Korean league and the Japanese leagues, you don't see guys willing to strike out often. You'll see guys fight off 2 strike counts, 8, 9 pitches. It's actually really, really entertaining to watch. But guys like Imanaga, he's able to strike out hitters. Just like the way Yamamoto is, just like the way Daisuke Matsuzaka was able to do, just like the way Nomo was able to do. They're getting guys who are just historically disciplined hitters to swing and miss. And if you can translate that to the major leagues, and of course it's a different class of hitter, but if you can make it work, and if you can make guys miss at this level, you got something. And with the stuff that you're able to do in these Japanese leagues, Korean leagues, like I said, with guys who are just totally against striking out swinging, like it's the 1930s again here. It's almost incredible. And I'm looking forward to him coming over and being, seeing if he can translate that style of pitching here. And if guys are going to bite at it. If he's not in the mix for the Mets, and I think they have other options if they want to go, I know a lot of people have talked about Giolito, and, that's another guy. It's almost like a Severino where it's like, what's the pitch lab going to do? Are you going to get the most out of him? I think we might see a few of those kind of options floated around, whether it's him, whether it's, I think Montgomery had a really, really nice run with Texas and even before that. And, if the Mets want to get involved in a guy like Montgomery, absolutely a great option to fall back on. But Yamamoto probably should be that guy. I wouldn't be surprised if they see a Michael Lorenzen in the mix, just as like a middle rotation guy. Michael Wacha, who has really, I know he had a very brief run with the Mets during their dark ages a few years ago, but he's been kind of lights out since. So I wouldn't be shocked. Me and Tarun talked about it on our show. If Jack Flaherty's healthy and he's taking a flyer on a prove-it deal, on a 1-year deal, I wouldn't be shocked to see Hefner get his claws in there and see what they can do with a guy like Jack Flaherty. But, after the Yamamotos of the world, it falls off considerably. They can make it work without a Yamamoto just by filling in depth pieces. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this cookie kind of crumbles.
Joe DeMaio of the Mets pod and SNY had a post saying if the Mets didn't get Yamamoto, he would steer away from giving a lot of money to the Montgomerys and the Blake Snells. And I know this comment here, I don't want anything to do with Snell. I kind of agree with that because I know he's going to be.
I'm with this guy. I'm with Savanos here.
Yeah, we're both with him. I would not be giving him anywhere near what Yamamoto's getting. Obviously he's not going to get that, but I mean like anywhere close to that because he's going to be wanting a lot of money. He won the Cy Young. I don't know. I just am not buying into Snell, and I know that.
I'm sorry. Have you ever seen a less respected Cy Young winner?
Yeah, no.
Like R.A. Dickey,
Rick Porcello, who's also a Met.
That's a good one. Yeah. Where's my bell? I have a bell around here. That would have got the bell. That was a good one.
But yeah, these guys that, maybe even Jordan Montgomery falls. And I like Jordan Montgomery. He's a guy that I would go after. But to give these guys, 5-6 year deals north of over 120, 150 may not be the wisest move for the Mets. Those are those kind of like trap deals that we would fall into normally. And Joe DeMaio was saying maybe they should go after these 1 year, like you said, prove it deals. And, I mentioned Jack Flaherty and we mentioned Giolito, even Seth Lugo, bringing Seth Lugo back. And those were kind of the names he was like, maybe they should go after those 1 or 2 year type deals and bring those guys in for a short term. So we may see something like that happen if they don't get Yamamoto, but all hopes are that they will. I will do what Carlos Ramos says. We will sign Yamamoto. Yes, we will. He will be ours. I want to 100% agree with that. We're going to get back into some of the comments shortly. Up, we got some here. Get Jordan Montgomery. There's another one for Montgomery here. How about this one's from Svenoise? Trade for Corbin Burns. What's your thought on possibly trading for Corbin Burns?
He won't be available. So that's wait, who's hurt? Woodruff or Burns? Burns is hurt, right?
No, Woodruff is out for the season.
Okay, Burns is good. Hey, if they're moving him and they can make it work, sure. I wouldn't be shocked to see the trade market heat up for the Mets. I'm not going to say I'm in any way glad that Ronnie Mauricio's temporarily on the shelf. I don't want to see him get moved, and if he was being discussed in any possible trades, if he's hurt, that's probably going to be shelved. But I wouldn't be shocked to see the Mets kind of move, at least entertain moving a couple of their young, and you can leave Alvarez off that list, but maybe like a Beatty or a Vientos. If they're takers and they can get a back-end starter, middle-ish reliever, whatever, I wouldn't be shocked to see the trade market start to heat up. And if Burns is going to be on that list, yeah, maybe you make something work. I know they're hesitant to move their prospects, but that's a front of the rotation guy. And you brought up Lugo. I wouldn't be quick to bite on Lugo. I like Seth Lugo. I think he's got good stuff. I thought he was better as a reliever, but yeah, I don't know if you would want to cross that bridge again, but that's just, fan opinion.
Being Mets fans, we know that the second time around never goes well for some of the returns that we have gotten. Let's switch over to, some hitting. Mets and Pete Alonso have not had contract extensions yet. That came out from Tim Healy of Newsday recently. And, we can all assume that right now the 100% focus is Yamamoto. Right. I mean, like that is the focus. Nothing else matters right now because we've seen a lot of these minor signings, but nothing to really add to the major league roster, as in, another starting pitcher outside of Luis Severino. But we really haven't seen much action. We know Ohtani and Yamamoto have been holding things up, but the Mets are just 100% focused, I think, on Yamamoto.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree with you. Yeah, at this point, with the way the dominoes are falling league-wide, yeah, I think all their attention's focused and turned to him.
Stern said that they will eventually meet, but they want to do things behind closed doors, and that's been the Mets, MO for ever since Steve Cohen has taken over as the owner. Everything has been mostly quiet. Any of these signings we see kind of like just come out of the blue ever so often. You saw it with Scherzer. We saw it with the trade of Lindor and the signing of Lindor. So Scott Boras, he's ready to talk. He says that they're open for business with contract extension talks. And do you see any progress in an extension being met this offseason? I know we talked a little bit about it at the State of the Mets panel, but I wanted you to, kind of expand on that.
I do. I actually do think they get it done before Pete hits free agency. I would love to say they get it done this winter, and I'll hesitantly hang my hat on that. Sure. We've seen Scott Boras get hired specifically by clients who are looking to get their extensions done before they hit free agency. One of the people I pointed out specifically was Xander Bogaerts, not the San Diego Padres deal, the Red Sox deal a few years back. Like specifically went out of his way to get Boras and get him locked up in Boston. And he got a great deal for it. With the deals that we've seen him and the Mets get done in recent years, whether it was Verlander, Scherzer, Nimmo, whatever, there's a good relationship there. I think Pete's made it very known that he wants to be in New York. We saw the T-shirt floating around recently. New York or nothing, was that right?
I think it was New York or nowhere.
New York or nowhere, my apologies. So, clearly there's mutual interest. Clearly the fan base would be heartbroken if they let him walk away. You have alumni reaching out. I think Darryl Strawberry did like an op-ed or something. He's like, you gotta let him stay. Yeah, I agree. You have to keep him around. And Pete's got his flaws. There's no debating that. When Pete's fully clicking, which will happen, like it's almost like a cycle with Pete. He'll figure it all out. The league gets a book on him. They'll attack him differently. Then he's got to adjust. And this will happen to Pete every 6 weeks or so. He'll be on a tear, and he'll figure it out. And he'll start hitting that breaking ball that's coming on the outside, and he's going to send it the other way. He's a very intelligent hitter with power to boot. But again, pitchers will make him their main focus. We're not going to let Pete Alonso beat us. And they're going to figure out a way to beat him, and then he has to adjust. It's baseball, baby. We love that. But what the Mets or anybody who's going to try and sign him, what they're going to try and do is say, oh, well, you got flaws. You got flaws. You look at Aaron Judge. He hits 330 with 50 home runs. You're not doing that. And, yeah, he's not doing that. And that's okay. But, if the Mets are going to entertain an extension for Pete, surely you're going to be looking somewhere in the ballpark of Matt Olson, which was 8,170-ish, 8,168 or something. That's a big commitment for a guy who's going to be into his late 20s soon. A power hitter, a slugger. He's a little round on the edges, and that's probably not going to change with age. Like, you might be looking at a 5-year, high 20s a year. And maybe that's a common ground you can come to with Pete, but it's going to be a really unique contract for him just because he's such a unique player. He can give you 40, 50 home runs a year, but he might hit 230, he might hit 270. He might look atrocious for a couple of months, but he's still Pete. So it's going to be really, really unique. And I think that's why he got Scott Boras in the mix, is because if anybody's going to know how to navigate this situation, it's going to be him. And if Pete says, this is where I want to be, just get me the best deal you can, I think this is the guy who checks all the boxes. So, yeah, I'm confident they're going to get it done. And, yeah, I'd like to say they get it done this offseason. I think that's on their priority list. I think this is the type of thing that would rejuvenate the fan base and keep that buzz moving like we were talking about before.
Yeah, I always thought that the two big moves coming into this offseason would be, one, to sign Yamamoto, and two, to give the extension to Pete Alonso. And I'm still on board with that coming to fruition. It was smart for Pete to bring in Boras, especially, you look at where Pete ranks within these first basemen. Obviously, Freeman, top of the heap, Matt Olson right up there. Those two guys are signed. Pete's the guy right now in this offseason. If you're in the need of a first baseman, if you're in the need of a power hitter, and he can supply, pretty good to decent defense, when called upon.
Average.
So he is going to he's going to get a lot of money just because of those parameters, just because of how everything works out. And he's going to probably be if Soto goes to free agency, which I think he will, especially after what we saw with Ohtani, he's definitely got to be going through his mind to go to free agency. So he'll be a top 2, hitter on the market. He's going to get a lot of money, and Boris is great at squeezing teams for that money to get, to his players. And I think it's going to work. It was the right move. I've never been a fan of Scott Boras, but I know what he does for his players. And it was definitely the right move for Pete to jump on board. And I think that, excuse me, I think that Brandon Nimmo did the same thing the previous season, where he, jumped on with Scott Boras right before he was getting set and ready for free agency. He hits the market and he ends up coming back to the Mets. So hopefully the same thing happens with Pete. So just to, clarify this whole thing, you think Pete gets the contract extensions talks this offseason and they get done this offseason?
I do. I think that nobody wants the distraction. I think that Pete wants to be here. I think that the Mets want him here. I think the Mets are going to have to pay a premium to not let him get to free agency. And I think Boris is salivating at that.
Let's get to some more of these comments. Ibby saying, Alonso discourse, everyone starts screaming. That's the requirement. We've seen a lot of it. Carlos Ramos is on the Tim train, man. Tim for president. How about that?
We love it.
Let's get it. Loving life. Maureen here saying, great show tonight, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for everyone for tuning in, being a part of the chat with me, with my good friend Tim Ryder here. And we really appreciate you coming out and joining the chat. Caribe Travel has an interesting comment because we mentioned, the Mets needing to protect Pete Alonso. That's something that I talked about a lot during that panel, and I thought was very important. What about thoughts on Lourdes Gurriel Jr. for left field and maybe being a bat to protect?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Mets are going to need some pop in their lineup. We are well aware that's got to be on the priority list. They neglected to really address the DH last year. It was a DH by committee. It was trying to turn Daniel Vogelbach into a full-time DH, which that's just not his forte. Trying to push him into that spot was a mistake. And, I think you have DJ Stewart now, and he could certainly plug into the corners. He could certainly help at DH. I think people have started talking about JD Martinez. I think his market's starting to heat up. You have Jorge Soler, who's still out there, who could play some corners. Certainly a good DH option.
Oscar Hernandez is another name. Not interested.
I was thinking more along the lines of Carlos Santana. And I know he kind of fits the veteran, let's see what we get kind of mold. But I think anywhere he goes, he has spurts, he hits. If he's used in the right place or in the right spots, he could really be, valuable. And just to add, depth, leadership, I think he would be a decent fit if they really can't put their finger on a true DH type guy of JD Martinez or Jorge Soler, someone like that. I think Carlos Santana would actually kind of fit the bill, but we'll see.
JD Martinez is definitely someone that I've been wanting for years. I wanted him last offseason, even with the back issues. He reminds me of, me also wanting Andrew Chafin. You want them to come to the Mets, and it just never happens. Now Andrew Chafin has just signed with another team as well. Anytime we needed a lefty, I needed an Andrew Chafin, and then we never signed them.
3 years in a row, right?
3
Like,
years in a
Jason,
row.
yep.
We always needed a lefty, and it was like, we'll go with Chasen Shreve. We'll go another route. I mean, it never ended up working. And maybe he just never wanted to come to New York anyway. But
Yeah.
man, to get a JD Martinez, that's a bat. You talk about leadership. You talk about veteran status. That is definitely a bat that I would look into, definitely, to come in and protect the Pete Alonso in that lineup. I'm trying to go through here. We are definitely going to I'm going to come back to Carlos Ortiz. He's got a comment on the Mauricio. We'll definitely get into that a little bit later on in the show for sure. Once again, I'm here with Tim Ryder, host of the Simply Amazing podcast and creator and writer for The Apple on Substack. You can follow Tim on X at Timothy R. Ryder. Let's continue on with extension talk because Francisco Alvarez wants an extension. Tim Healy of Newsday reported that the catcher is open to contract extensions. We look at his season last year coming up, 2023 stats. 209 batting average wasn't great in that part if you're a big on batting average. 25 home runs, 63 RBIs, a 721 OPS. In the perfect world, he would kind of be the bat you want to protect Pete Alonso, but I mean, he's definitely has a lot to work on, a lot to improve on, up and down season. But, he showed a lot of promise and really improved defensively, especially with his pitch framing. We can agree that this is not the off season that we are going to see this, right?
An Alvarez extension.
Yeah.
I would assume it's probably down the priority list. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Mets revisit this, especially if he kind of doesn't miss a beat going into his sophomore season. We saw the potential. I think we see the ceiling that Alvarez has and the work that, one, he's already put in into becoming a major leaguer. Two, I mean, we've seen clips of him all offseason putting in all types of different work, whether it's weight room, whether it's catcher training, defense training, quickness, agility drills, whatever. He's making every effort to just be the best major leaguer he can be. If he continues on this trajectory, and especially if he can translate his offseason work and everything he's kind of done to learn his craft, in addition to just learning, major league pitching from a hitter's standpoint, if he can put it all together and continue on that upwards incline next year, I wouldn't be shocked that they'll go ahead and revisit this mid-season. We've seen this happen before. Team is that impressed with the player. You know what? Yeah, you're getting the extension now. I think young kid from Tampa Bay who got it a couple of years ago.
We see it a lot with the Braves. They do it with their own players.
With the Braves. Look at Milwaukee. They have Chourio, who's not even in the majors yet. They're like, yo, we love what you're doing. Sign him up. And I'm sure that, him and his representation are putting this into the world under the same ideas. And that's fine. I think Alvarez could be that echelon of player where it's like, oh, wow, Mets better lock him up now. You don't see, catchers who can field the position and hit the way he does at that age with that passion for the game. And yeah, if he wants to talk about it, if I'm the Mets, let's discuss it, but keep on showing me that you're the person we think you are. You're the player we think you are. And, I would say that very, very near future, that discussion is going to be a reality.
Yeah, I would think maybe, within the next 2 to 3 years, we might see something like this take place. The Mets aren't a team that in the past would really jump into something like this. The last time I could ever see this happening, I think they did it with Juan Lagares. That was I think going that back far, I think Juan Lagares maybe was 2013-ish, 2013, 2014.
He broke his toe on opening day, right?
Yeah. And So, obviously different regime, different ownership, different front office now with David Stearns. I don't know if David Stearns has done anything like this in Milwaukee in his time. I tend to go back and see, has he done something like this that would make me believe that maybe he would do this with Alvarez, but maybe, that he has more money working with Cohen. Maybe this is something that we might see the Mets start doing with their players, because they really missed the boat on doing this with Pete Alonso, because now Pete Alonso is going to cost a buttload of money. I want to go back to what Carlos Ortiz says, because this is another part of the baby Mets here. And the other night, Ronnie Mauricio, who was playing very well. I think he was like 4 for 4 in the Winter League. He got hurt trying to, steal second. I initially thought that he might have sprained his ankle. It looked like he twisted his ankle and sprained it. A lot of people think it's his knee. Did you see the play, Tim, at all?
I did. It was just a very grainy Twitter clip. It looked like it could have been a significant-ish injury. I believe he's going back to New York. MRI will give us the full story on that. I'm not one for much speculation, but
he did walk off on his own power, so take that with what you will.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, that's important.
Yeah, no, I want to certainly optimistic. I think if he was in a substantial amount of pain, it would have been, we would have noticed. But it certainly didn't look good the way that he went down. The fact that he's coming back to New York for an MRI probably isn't promising. I'm not going to, oh my goodness, he's going to be out for the year. I'm not putting my eggs in that basket just yet. But that might be the end of his Winter League season, even if this is just minor. If he's going to be a big part of the Mets in 2023, I'd prefer seeing him get healthy and getting a nice full off season and coming to spring training 100%. If he's good to go though, yeah, get back out there, man. Come to spring training fresh. But if there's something you got to work through injury wise, yeah, go ahead and work through it. And he'll have more time to play Dominican winter ball.
When I look at the infield alignment and how I wanted these players to be situated, because we know that the Mets are not going outside for third base. They're going to stay in-house for that. We know that Stearns talked about McNeil getting more playing time at second base. I actually wanted to see more of Mauricio at second base. I thought he played a lot better second base than he did at third base. But, with Mauricio, Beatty, obviously they have Vientos there, and, Joey Wendell will play all around the infield. Come opening day, who is it that you want to see play third base for the Mets?
Third base, I would slot Ronnie in over Beatty, just because I think his bat, at least right now and even into the future, will probably play a little more powerful than Beatty's. I think Beatty's hit tool is terrific. I think he's going to be a fine major leaguer. And also Ronnie's athleticism and his arm. He's got a cannon for an arm at third base. And I'd love to see him develop into a good third baseman. I think, like you just said, you saw his comfort level in the middle infield, coming from short, moving over to second. He was kind of able to translate that really, really well. I think it's only a matter of time before he gets comfortable at third if he's not getting there already. I believe he had 5 straight errorless games playing third in the Winter League before he got hurt. So I see, to the stars for Ronnie Mauricio. I think that he has that type of potential. Might be biased. I've been a big fan of Ronnie since he was like 17 years old. I think he is that player who can continue to keep on, whether it's him setting his own goals or whether it's the team or the fan base saying, I don't think he could do this. I think he's going to keep on doing that. I think he's, his on base is going to be an issue. Yeah, give him a year versus major league pitching. He's going to realize I can hit a ball that's 8 inches out of the zone, 400 feet. But do I have to? Is this going to be good for me in the long run? That only comes with experience. And until he's facing competition that won't let him get away with, he might hit a couple of dingers that are well outside of the strike zone. He's not going to do that every time. That's the only way he's going to learn. But I think he has the potential to learn and become the player that everyone kind of thinks he can be. Some stronger than others, of course. But yeah, I give Mauricio all the opportunities I can if I'm the Mets. I think he has a future that's kind of unlike anybody else's in that cold baby Mets class. I mean, you can put him with Alvarez, but comparing a a catcher to anybody is just apples and oranges. Yeah.
Well, like you said, outside of Alvarez, let's leave, Alvarez, out of the, the talk. But Mauricio seems to have the most potential of the other three. You include Beatty, you include Vientos in that. We thought Beatty would be that guy, and it just hasn't, worked out for him. He's also hasn't had the chance to play a full season. Yeah. I think that the unfortunate thing for him was right out of spring training, his bat was alive, and they decided, we're going to do Eduardo Escobar at third, and when the time comes, if it comes, we'll bring up Beatty and we'll let Beatty cook in AAA. And I thought maybe to his detriment that took a toll on him, and he got brought up, got sent back down, and it was just a whole mess for him. But you like Mauricio at third. I was kind of more of a Mauricio at second. I liked the way he worked well with Lindor, and Lindor on either side is a huge leader, and will definitely man the infield the way that he does, and the way that we love to see him do that out there. And I hope that Mauricio takes those next steps. We saw it starting last year in winter ball. We keep seeing the progression year, and we hope to continue to see that. I don't know, what happens with, a Beatty and a Vientos, whether, it's trade, whether it's moves to the outfield or be part-time DHs. But the Mets have a huge decision. At the very least, I wanted them to make a decision on whether they were going to go with the kids and at third base this season, or if they were going to, bring in a stopgap or someone to play while these kids, try to get better at AAA. But it seems like they're going to go with the kids, and I know I'm happy to see it, especially in a year that the expectations are low. So, we'll see what happens with them. One more thing I want to get into with you. And actually, before that, Ibby goes, Tim wants those Mauricio cards going up, baby. Get those cards. Get those cards. Skyrocket those.
Ronnie stocks, baby. Give me those Ronnie stocks. No, hey, those have been in the collection for a while. That's been a roller coaster of Ronnie, Ibby. Up and down. But no, in it for the long haul. I got some good stuff. I'll do a little Ronnie card show one day.
Yeah, we got to see some of the Ryder cards come out soon.
Oh my gosh. I got a it's like an image variation of his like first Bowman.
Wow.
It's cool. He's got these like dyed blonde in the middle. Oh, it's an awesome photo. Yeah, I'll have to put that up on Twitter.
They just come out with some really nice looking cards every year, and
it hits you right in the nostalgia, bro. If you're of a certain age, it's like, oh man, it's like you're a kid again. It's so fun.
Awesome. Always awesome stuff, and always awesome to see you, you post them every year, and even not of the Mets, other players as well. So it's, are you still doing that account? It was was it Ryder Cards?
Ryder Cards. Yeah, I still have it going. Not as often. Social media has become a bit of a dumpster fire lately, so it's kind of intermittent for me, even on the main account. But yeah, I still do my cards. I still have an eBay page, and I guess it's kind of like I guess in a lull, you could say, but that's off season every year. It's like this.
Once the season hits up, more prospects come up. The kid from Milwaukee that signed the extension, once he comes up, I'm pretty sure you got your Corbin Carroll stock as well.
Oh yeah, we got Carroll, we got Centurio here. I got a bunch of Orioles. I've been collecting these Orioles kids for a while. I got a lot of Adley. I got a bunch of Cedric Mullins, who, I don't want to say undersung because he's an all-star. He's a 30-30 guy. That is the glue to that Baltimore team in my mind. And I'm not sure he gets all the credit he deserves, but I'm a big Cedric Mullins fan.
No, Cedric Mullins was a guy that I got on my fantasy team, helped me to lead in the top of the division for a long time, and really good player, really solid. Before we switch to one final thing here, Carlos Ramos says, I think it's time we start thinking of Beatty as a trade piece. Alvarez worked on his game. Viento's working on his game this offseason. Ronnie has the last 2 winters. Beatty doesn't. It's time to be honest. On top of that, Ibby says 16 people in here. Make sure you hit that thumbs up. Yes, thumbs up. Subscribe. Make sure you are liking the show and all that fun stuff. Make sure you're following me at Subway To Shea, Tim at Timothy R. Ryder, and Tim, plug your Twitter handles for Simply Amazin and the Apple.
Sure. Simply Amazin is just Simply Amazin Pod. There's no G at the end of Amazin, just Simply Amazin Pod. The Apple is our Substack page. Twitter is the Apple NYM, the Apple New York Mets, but the Apple NYM. The website is also theapplenym.substack.com. You can find Simply Amazin anywhere you get podcasts, Apple Pods, Spotify. We are not on YouTube currently, but it is in the works. We're going to make that happen soon. But, and I can't thank you enough for having me on, man. Every time we hang out, every time we chat, it's a great conversation, and this one was no different.
Yeah, and we'll definitely do it more often as well. Like I just started getting into doing the YouTube. I'm way behind on things. I just got into the YouTube, just got into doing the live. So I know that we've talked about you wanted to do something on YouTube, so we can always discuss that as well. That's My Sports says that they already did subscribe and like. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Before we wrap up here, the Mets made some minor off-season moves last week. They brought in Michael Tolkin, possible swingman, long reliever. Jorge Lopez, who, a reliever as well. Jose Iglesias, which I think we mentioned a little bit earlier on, to add to the infield depth along with Joey Wendell. Taylor Cowley, I don't know too much about him. There's a lot of depth moves here. Do you see any of these signings making an impact on the 2024 Mets? One that I'm looking at, obviously, Jorge Lopez. I know he hasn't had the greatest career. He had, one really good season, but he's reuniting with the newly hired bullpen coach, Jose Rosado. They worked together for Team Puerto Rico in the WBC, which he pitched very well in. So I'm going to be keeping my eye on Jorge Lopez, especially for middle relief. Something, and maybe, him reuniting with Edwin Diaz. They both were on Team Puerto Rico. Maybe that's something that he can look to. He could look to Edwin Diaz to mentor him, to get him used to being in New York, pitching in New York, and being a part of this bullpen. So he's the one I'm looking at. Are you also looking at Jorge Lopez? Is there someone else that you saw that the Mets signed, one of these minor signings that you think will have impact in 2024?
I think Tonkin is going to be a little more valuable than people are expecting. I think he's going to be fine to be like a 6th inning guy. If you need him in the 7th inning. Look, if he worked in the 7th inning for the Braves, he was probably going to work in the 7th for the Mets. So, whatever works there. I think Lopez might be one of the Mets' best additions, or might turn out to be one of the Mets' best additions this offseason. I was following him pretty closely in 2022. I was hoping that if the Orioles were going to be sellers, that he would be attached to something. I said it on the pod this morning. I believe when Mancini was getting shopped around a couple of years ago, I put it on Twitter. I said, boy, I'd love for Lopez to be attached. When his changeup is working, when his slider is working, it accentuates his fastball to the point that it makes it, I don't want to say unhittable, but unpredictable. And if he can get back to that, especially, I think even in all walks of life, a new set of eyes could really change everything for anybody in any situation. for a guy like Lopez or anyone in that kind of scenario where you have that much talent, I think putting him in the right situation, he could really be. I explained Brooks Raley as almost like a 2A to Edwin Diaz's 1, and we needed a 2B. I think Jorge Lopez could be a 2B theoretically. I'm not sure if he's going to be Adam Ottavino. I saw someone ask that question openly, like, could Lopez be Adam Ottavino for this team? In a sense, yes. I think Lopez could be Lopez. I think he could be a force.
He was wasn't he a closer in his first run with the Baltimore Orioles?
I want to say a setup, like an 8th inning guy, and he was leading up to not the guy they have now, but the other. I'll pull it up right now. They have a really nice back end of their.
Yeah, they do. They do. Yeah, I thought in his first run with Baltimore that he, at least at some point, he must have closed out some portion of games.
I'm sure. I'm sure he got some. Yeah.
Yeah, but seeing him in that bullpen, obviously, bullpens are a dime a dozen. You get the Jekyll and Hyde effect with these guys every year, and who knows? Maybe this is a time for Jorge Lopez to step it up. We know that Adam Ottavino had a hard time with holding guys on, and that became a big problem, especially last year with the new rules that hurt him. And you know what? He didn't have a terrible season. If you look at the stats, having a 3 ERA in that bullpen that we had last year seems to be pretty good. It's just that in some of these big games that the Mets needed, that's when he blew up. So, Adam Ottavino is on the outs now. We got Jorge Lopez in, and I'm sure that the Mets will get some major league talent in there in the bullpen as well. Absolutely. Some legit guys, whether it's a David Robertson that they go after or Jordan Hicks. I'm sure that there will be some guys that the Mets bring in here that will not be, reclamation projects or, trials. So we'll see where they go with that. But to see him with the bullpen coach from Puerto Rico, with Edwin Diaz, I think it's going to work out pretty well. And I hope it does. I hope he's able to turn his career back around.
Oh, likewise. And I think that, if the Mets really want to go upper level, they have options in kind of every level for their bullpen, but they're going to have to, like you said, they're going to have to, and starting rotation and bullpen, starting, pitching staff, they're going to have to make upgrades before spring training across the board. Peterson's not going to be ready until mid-season. Lucchesi and McGill are probably not your 4 and 5 as they're penciled in right now. You're going to make additions everywhere. I mean, you can go to a Liam Hendricks if he's looking to come to New York. You can look to a David Robertson if he's looking to come back to New York. I think I agree with you. That would be a really nice move. I think he expressed a little interest in revisiting that.
Yeah, I don't think he wanted to leave. I don't think he wanted to be traded in the first place, and it showed in his first month with Miami.
Yeah, I mean, I think who's out there? Michael Fulmer's out there. There's guys who, they're not going to blow your socks off like much of a wow factor. But there's guys out there who can certainly be pieced together and form a nice bullpen. And, the Mets have all these resources and all these new eyes on their projects, and you just got to hope they put it all together. But there are options. If they want to go in a let's pick some guys to do some things sort of route, they certainly have the options to do that, whether it's free agency, whether it's trade, they have decisions to make. I'm not counting them out of this offseason. They got a lot of work to do. You got to keep up with the Braves and the Phillies. Who knows if they could do that this offseason, but you have to at least keep pace. You can't fall too far behind because you got the Marlins nipping at your heels, and they're a very, very much up-and-coming franchise themselves.
Yeah, Carlos is in agreement with us. He would also bring back David Robertson. Look, there hasn't been much movement this offseason except for Aaron Nola returning to Philly. You had Ohtani go to LA. You had Soto get traded to the Yankees. But, I see a lot of frustration out there. And like I said, Met fans you can be frustrated if you want. I am not going to hold it to you. But, I always try to say anytime someone brings one of these tweets up to me or posts or whatever you want to call them now on X, who was the guy that signed that you wanted? And there really hasn't been one. And for me, it was Eduardo Rodriguez. He was one of the guys that I wanted for the rotation. Outside of that, no one has signed that I wanted. Everyone's still up for grabs. And I'm being realistic because, Ohtani I thought was not going to happen. But Yamamoto, there's still a chance. And I want Yamamoto.
I think the odds makers still have the Mets up towards the they had them up towards the top of that list, and I would say they're probably still top 2, top 3 at this moment.
Yeah, hopefully that situation fixes itself and the Mets can get their guy. That's who they want. And I hope it goes the way the Mets want it, because, seeing a lot of the fans frustrated, seeing, like I mentioned during the panel, the PTSD of, it's not going to work out our way. I just like for this one time for the Mets to get, the guy that they wanted, the guy that they pursuing, the guy that they traveled 14 hours to go see, and visit and show that they really want him. We all want to see Yamamoto on opening day in the blue and orange at Citi Field against Milwaukee, because I think that's the first series of the year against the Brewers, if I am correct. They start off at home.
Nice.
But like Carlos Ortiz says, once Yamamoto signs, all others will fall, and hopefully that will be the case. That's going to wrap it up here for the Subway to Shea podcast. Tim, it's always a pleasure having you on. I really appreciate it. Let everyone know what you're working on.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we got the pod coming out weekly. I've been working on a deep dive on what this roster might look like by opening day, and it's just a jumbled pad of pencil and eraser marks at this point. But I got some good written content. Should be out by the end of the week. Check out the Apple. Sign up. It's always free. Never any paywalls.
Well, Tim, you can follow Tim on X at Tim R. Ryder. Make sure to subscribe to Simply Amazin on Apple Podcasts and the Apple Substack. Tim Ryder, ladies and gentlemen, you get the clap, my friend. Always great seeing you. Ibby, one last comment. It better be packed with stars, Tim. Otherwise, not good enough.
$300 million payroll, Ibby, I promise.
And we'll leave it on that note. You can follow Subway to Shea on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. Listen, subscribe to the Subway to Shea podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Turn on your notifications to never miss an episode of Subway to Shea. You can rate the show. You could leave comments for the show for me to review, whether you like it, whether you don't like it. I want to know it all. Let me know what you're thinking. This episode will be out on audio form tomorrow, so please be on the lookout for that. Obviously, Subway to Shea is on YouTube. You've been watching it now. Make sure you're subscribing. Make sure you like the video, and get all the notifications from my channel. There will be clips from this show that will be posted. You'll see some shorts up there as well. We're doing it all for you Met fans out there, and you can leave comments as well as a huge thumbs up. That would really appreciate it. Don't forget to follow my work for Rising Apple. Rising Apple's New York Mets site on the Fansided Network. You can read my articles by going to risingapple.com. Make sure to follow Rising Apple on Twitter at Rising Apple Blog and the Fansided Network at Fansided. Tim, this was a lot of fun. Matt Ibby saying, love it, boys. Great stuff. Carlos Ortiz saying, thank you, guys. And thank you all. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for being here with me and Tim, and for joining in the chat, joining in the conversation. I love the interaction, and you guys help my podcast grow each and every week, and I can't thank you enough. For Anthony Rivera, for Tim Ryder, this has been the Subway to Shea podcast, and as always, let's go Mets.